In a rematch of Super Bowl 57, you got the Chiefs and the Eagles. The Eagles, revenge-minded, against a Chiefs team that, have you heard, is chasing history. No team's ever won 3 Super Bowls in a row.
If the Eagles are going to become the first team to defeat the Chiefs in a one-score game where the Chiefs have won a record 17 straight games, and if the Eagles are going to be the team that keeps the Chiefs from winning a 3rd straight Super Bowl, and it's going to come from Saquon Barkley.
The 2024 NFL season has officially ended. It was a super fun season filled with trades, drama, and high-scoring games between some super powerful teams. And the best part of all is we got to see the downfall of Aaron Rodgers and probably the end of Deshaun Watson's career. Jokes aside, there were 2 teams that stood above the rest: the Philadelphia Eagles and the reigning Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. Despite the craziness of the NBA trade deadline this past week, the Super Bowl refused to be overshadowed. The game had so much hype coming into it, and it absolutely delivered. Before we get to the content, make sure you drop like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications so you can stay up to date with the latest NFL news during the crazy offseason. And now that we get all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? 2 years ago, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles faced off in Super Bowl 57, a fantastic game that ended with a questionable call in favor of the Kansas City Chiefs, which has been all too familiar this season, and we have a separate video on that. Super Bowl 57 was a huge one for the Chiefs, as it was their 2nd championship win in the Mahomes era and was the start of what would become 3 straight Super Bowl appearances, with the chance of becoming the first team in NFL history to three-peat. However, there was a big difference between Super Bowl 57 and Super Bowl 59. The Philadelphia Eagles are a much different team than the Chiefs saw in 2023. Yes, their offensive core of Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, and Devontae Smith are still intact, but there's one major difference to their offense since their previous Super Bowl run, and it isn't just the loss of Jason Kelce. In the offseason, Philadelphia would sign former division rival Pro Bowl running back Saquon Barkley, who just so happened to grow up in the eastern Pennsylvania area, to a 3-year, $37.75 million contract, solidifying the Eagles' backfield as one of the scariest in all of football. I mean, the fact that the Giants let a player of this caliber walk to a division rival is still insane.
Saquon, you doing all right? I just talked to Ed, and I think the right thing to do is let you test the market and see what your value is.
And it was clear how much of a game changer Saquon was in New York, but it was even more evident once you put him behind arguably the best offensive line in all of football.
And the AP Offensive Player of the Year, presented by Microsoft Surface, is Saquon Barkley.
In his first season as a Philadelphia Eagle, Saquon Barkley would have by far the best season of his career, rushing for 2,005 yards, making him only the 9th player in NFL history to rush for 2,000 yards in a season, and only the 2nd active player alongside Ravens' Derrick Henry. He also rushed for 13 touchdowns, and that number would have been even higher if it weren't for Jalen Hurts pushing for 14. This performance earned Saquon his first Offensive Player of the Year award, which is crazy since the guy he beat out, Jamar Chase, literally won the receiver triple crown this season, and that's how good Saquon is. And it's only been 1 season, but Saquon might already be the greatest running back in Eagles history over guys like Brian Westbrook, LaShawn McCoy, and Jalen Hurts. And a ring would solidify it. Now, 2 years ago, Philadelphia rolled up to the Super Bowl with Miles Sanders as their running back 1, who is currently a 3rd stringer on one of the worst offenses in football in Carolina. He also only rushed for a whopping 17 yards in Super Bowl 57. However, that is a testament to how good the Chiefs' rushing defense is, and this will be one of the biggest things to watch for in Super Bowl 59. The Kansas City Chiefs win versus Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills in the AFC Championship was their 18th straight playoff game without allowing a 100-yard rusher, and their 18th straight overall. Their 2 playoff games leading up to the Super Bowl included dominant performances against Joe Mixon, Josh Allen, and James Cook, but ultimately none of these guys are Saquon Barkley when it comes to rushing the football. Steve Spagnuolo and the Chiefs may be the kings of not allowing 100-yard rushers, but they had yet to face Saquon Barkley. Over the Eagles' 19 games coming into the Super Bowl, Saquon rushed for over 100 yards in 14 of them, including 5 straight, after a 118-yard, 3-touchdown outburst against the Washington Commanders in the NFC Championship. It was clear from the get-go that Saquon was going to be the biggest difference for the Eagles compared to their last meeting, but their defense had already made some drastic changes since losing one of the biggest games in franchise history.
What do you think, true or false? This Eagles team is better than the one that lost to the Chiefs 2 years ago.
I would agree with almost everything Lige just said. Totally agree.
In 2022, the Philadelphia Eagles finished the regular season with one of the best defenses in all of football, finishing in the top 10 with the likes of Darius Slay and Fletcher Cox leading the way, but it just wasn't enough, letting Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs offense score 38 on them to win it all. Philadelphia's general manager, Howie Roseman, knew that, so he did everything he could to upgrade his defense, and man, what a job he did. He started off the 2023 NFL draft selecting Jalen Carter with the 9th overall pick, who would become an all-pro defensive tackle by his second year in the league. This guy is an absolute game wrecker, and although they did have Fletcher Cox 2 years ago, Jalen Carter is a significant upgrade and a special talent. Their 2023 season was disappointing, ending in a wild-card loss to Baker Mayfield and the Bucs, but they did face the Chiefs in a Monday night rematch, a game that they would win 21-17, and they thought they had figured out how to finally topple the mighty Kansas City Chiefs. And Nick Sirianni had a lot to say after the win. The thing about beating the Chiefs in the regular season, though, is that it doesn't really matter until you beat them in the playoffs. Just ask Josh Allen. Philly had still been lingering over their loss to Kansas City in the Super Bowl, and Howie Roseman made it his mission to continue upgrading the team until Philly could beat them. Howie added 3 major players on the defensive side of the ball that offseason. First, he looked to the draft, just as he did a year prior to find Jalen Carter, but this time he would place an emphasis on his secondary by drafting cornerbacks Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean with his first 2 picks. Mitchell was widely regarded as the best cornerback in the draft after the combine, and DeJean wasn't that far behind him, so it was an absolute miracle that Philadelphia was able to select both. Next, Roseman looked to free agency, where he would address the middle linebacker position by getting the biggest steal in free agency, signing former New Orleans Saint Zach Bond to a measly 1-year, $3.5 million contract. Now I know what you might be thinking, 2 rookies and an unknown linebacker doesn't sound like a lot, but these 3 players completely changed the Philadelphia Eagles defense. Mitchell and DeJean both finished as finalists for the Defensive Rookie of the Year award, with Mitchell not allowing a touchdown for the majority of the season, and DeJean becoming one of the best slot corners in all of football. As for the vet, Zach Bond was arguably the best linebacker in all of football this year, being named a first-team All-Pro and even finishing as a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year.
But how impressed have you been by what Zach Bond has done this season?
They're playing unbelievable.
Philadelphia finished the 2024 season with the 2nd best defense in all of football, making him arguably the best defense that Patrick Mahomes will play all year. So they upgraded on offense by getting Saquon, and they upgraded on defense by getting some new All-Pros. But what have the Chiefs done since their previous matchup? Honestly, not too much. Their wide receiver room is completely different, with the additions of Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, and Xavier Worthy. Juju Smith-Schuster was around during the previous Super Bowl matchup between these two, but he took a year hiatus to collect a bag from the New England Patriots. But for the most part, this is the same core, but they've just been letting their players develop. Why wouldn't they? The last time a team not named the Chiefs won the Super Bowl was in the 2021 season, and it's safe to say that what they're doing is working. They drafted Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis in 2022. Both have turned into stars, with McDuffie making back-to-back All-Pro teams. And going into this game, they had yet to have a season in the NFL where they didn't end up as champions. Kansas City has done some absolutely ridiculous stuff in the last 3 years, so changing up their core wouldn't make too much sense. They've continued to rely on guys like Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, and Nick Bolton to lead them to success, on top of having the best quarterback in football, of course. That combined with a stout offensive line, I mean, I made a video 2 weeks ago talking about how beatable they've looked all year, with Mahomes even having arguably his worst season as a pro, but they just keep winning. But Super Bowl 59 has has the biggest stakes out of the last three. For Kansas City, if they are to win this game, they would cement themselves as one of the greatest dynasties in sports history, and easily the best of the last decade. They'd have an argument to be the best dynasty in NFL history as well. Patrick Mahomes would become a top 5 player in NFL history, and honestly would have a good case for second behind Tom Brady. Andy Reid would cement himself as a top coach in NFL history, and vets like DeAndre Hopkins and Kareem Hunt would get their first ring. Yeah, despite being known for being a chief, Kareem Hunt doesn't have a ring. Meanwhile, for the Philadelphia Eagles, if they were to win this game, a new powerhouse in the NFC would be born. Jalen Hurts would have an argument to sneak into the Hall of Fame. Saquon Barkley would top off what would be the greatest running back season in the history of the sport. And Howie Roseman's legacy would be even greater after what he did to improve the team after a Super Bowl loss. In just 2 years, we have a Super Bowl rematch with legacies on the line and more stakes than ever, and history indeed was made in this game. The Philadelphia Eagles would start out with the ball in the Super Bowl, just like they did 2 years ago, but they wouldn't get the result that they wanted to start the biggest game of the season. Kansas City would have Philly in a third down situation, and Jalen Hurts would find A.J. Brown deep with a beautiful outside shoulder fade, but A.J. Brown would get called for a very questionable offensive pass interference call on Trent McDuffie. This would negate the play and force Philadelphia to punt. If the refs were trying to shut down the agenda that they were paid off by the Chiefs, this was not a good start. Honestly, this was a horrific call, and before you start to say I'm some sort of low-key Eagles fan, there's a Patrick Mahomes jersey on my wall, and I'm a Cowboy fan. I don't know how to explain that. That aside, even Nick Sirianni had to say something. I mean, all fans noticed it at this point. It wasn't all bad for Philly, though. As a matter of fact, it probably wouldn't be bad for Philly for the rest of the half, because they would hold the Kansas City Chiefs to a 3-and-out on the following drive, showing that their brand new defense came to play. On the next drive, I think the referees were trying to make up for the offensive pass interference call, because Trent McDuffie would be called for a very questionable unnecessary roughness call on Dallas Goedert after he made minimal contact to his head. They both went up for the ball, and it was a major overthrow. There wasn't much else he could do. That gave Philly a fresh set of downs, and just 2 plays later, Jalen Hurts would find Jahan Dotson for what he thought was a touchdown, but his knee touched down at the 1. But this would just delay the inevitable, though, because everyone in the building knew what they were doing next. Jalen Hurts would get his cheeks shoved into the end zone to give the Philadelphia Eagles a 7-0 early lead. At this point, Philly had all the momentum. They would force Patrick Mahomes to yet another 3-and-out, but to be honest, that just doesn't happen very often. Philly was about to start their third offensive drive, and Kansas City had only had plays on offense excluding punts. It was starting to feel like the three-peat was simply not going to happen. But as the great Tony Romo and Chris Collinsworth say,
you can never count out Patrick Mahomes.
Once again, Kansas City got a stop on third down, sacking Jalen Hurts, but Charles Omenihu was lined up slightly off sides, and Philly would get a free set of downs once again. At least this one was a good call, and honestly, it was offside a ton in the first quarter, and all but one went uncalled. It wouldn't matter though. Philly had a chance to go up 2 possessions, but Jalen Hurts, under a ton of pressure, threw up a prayer that would end up getting picked off by Brian Cook. He's lucky that his defense was playing out of their minds, because that could have been a very costly interception, but it wasn't, because Philadelphia would force yet another 3-and-out. Now, this was getting kind of crazy. Patrick Mahomes was playing very poor football through 3 drives. And bear in mind, this is the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes has been in plenty of these. He was going to have to find that Mahomes magic if Kansas City were to have any chance in this game. And there was some magic, just not from Patrick Mahomes yet, because the Kansas City Chiefs would catch a huge break on Philly's next drive. It looked like someone on their field goal unit jumped off sides on 4th and 4, which would have given the Eagles yet another free first down, but it was ultimately called a false start on the Eagles' long snapper, and Philly would settle for 3. Now, Kansas City did go down 2 possessions, but it could have been much worse given the circumstances. Just kidding. Philly would sack Patrick Mahomes twice on 1st and 2nd down, and then one of these rookies I was talking about earlier, Cooper DeJean, would get a pick 6 to give the Philadelphia Eagles a 17-point lead without even allowing a first down yet. The kid got his first NFL pick as a pick 6 in the Super Bowl on his birthday. Absolutely unbelievable. It just kept getting better for Philly too, because they would sack Mahomes yet again for another 3-and-out. This was feeling like a very one-sided half of football in the 59-year history of the Super Bowl. Kansas City got another shot to put points on the board with less than 2 minutes left in the half, but Zach Bond would end up picking Mahomes off in the first play. These new additions are showing up. Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown would then connect on an easy touchdown, but it was suddenly a 24-0 ball game. If you would have told me that this game was going to go like this a week ago, I would have called you insane. This team just could not catch a break, and it was insane to watch. Mahomes had a chance at his first down of the game and a chance to score before the half, but DeAndre Hopkins would slip and drop a wide open ball 20 yards down the field, leaving them scoreless in the first half and needing the game to flip on its head in the second half if they wanted to win. Personally, I joked about this on X, saying that Patrick Mahomes was simply just trying to recreate Tom Brady's 28-3 comeback versus the Atlanta Falcons. The Kansas City Chiefs started the second half with the ball, and their first drive of the half was absolutely their best drive of the game so far, but they still only had got around 20 yards and let up multiple big sacks, and that's how bad they were through 30 minutes. The Kansas City offensive line wasn't doing anything to help Patrick Mahomes against this ferocious pass rush, and it had cost them the game up till this point. The start of the half somehow got even worse for Kansas City, as Chris Jones would end up re-injuring his knee, on top of Philadelphia adding on another 3 points. It was a 27-0 game with 5 minutes left in the third quarter, but I still couldn't count out Patrick Mahomes just yet. But I'm not gonna lie, Patrick Mahomes has been terrible up until this moment. Mahomes tried his best on their next drive, getting a first down on a crazy scramble, but it would ultimately be called back, leading to a turnover on downs after longtime Eagle Avonte Maddox stopped a Mahomes pass to DeAndre Hopkins on 4th down. It had officially felt over, even though we still had an entire quarter of play left. And that feeling was furthered when just one play later, Jalen Hurts would find Devontae Smith with an absolute bomb, putting the dagger into the Kansas City Chiefs dynasty, securing that they wouldn't three-peat and getting sweet revenge for their heartbreaking loss 2 years ago. That is, unless Patrick Mahomes could do the unthinkable. After that one-play bomb, Mahomes was finally able to drive down the field and find Xavier Worthy for their first touchdown of the game. They would fail to convert the 2-point conversion, but it was once again a 4-possession game, and the Chiefs' offense finally showed signs of life, so it was impossible to predict what could happen next. Chris Jones had also made his return to the game at this point, giving Chiefs fans some extra hope. Unfortunately, that hope wouldn't last very long, as Philly would take some very meaningful time off the clock and tally another 3 points, putting this game out of reach with 10 minutes left. The literal next play was the absolute end for Kansas City, as Milton Williams, one of the more underrated members of the Eagles defense, would get a strip sack on Patrick Mahomes. Fans of this channel know that I personally, as a fan of football, hate the Philadelphia Eagles, but at the same exact time, I have always been envious about the way this team constructed its roster. I mean, whether it was taking very intelligent risks like drafting Jalen Carter a few years back, or just being very on top of their moves like extending AJ Brown before the wide receiver market exploded, extending Devontae Smith before any other wide receiver got an extension this past offseason. As a result, they were able to afford signing Saquon Barkley, putting one of the best rushers behind the best offensive line in NFL history. I mean, at a specific point, when you consistently make intelligent roster decision after intelligent roster decision, you are going to win a Super Bowl. And that's been a huge theme of my channel. You don't win a Super Bowl by investing a significant amount of capital in a franchise player and then seeing him get injured in the middle of the season. You win a Super Bowl by using your cap space wisely, and that's what the Philadelphia Eagles did. And despite me absolutely despising the Philadelphia Eagles, despite me even memeing Jalen Hurts in this very video, calling him a running back in the quarterback position, I have to admit, they did everything that was necessary to win the Lombardi this year, and there is no one more deserving of winning a Super Bowl this year than the Philadelphia Eagles. And if you're a fan of this channel, you would understand how much it kills me to say that. I want to congratulate Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown because there was some beef in the middle of the season, but most importantly, I don't think the Super Bowl would have been won if it wasn't for Howie Roseman, or if it wasn't for Joe Shane letting Saquon Barkley walk to their division rival. But since the departure of Carson Wentz, Howie Roseman has been consistently aggressive in trying to upgrade this roster in hopes of winning a Super Bowl, and it looks like he was able to succeed once again. So if you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, enjoy the fact that a Dallas Cowboys fan is congratulating you on your Super Bowl victory. Because there's no question about it, I haven't seen a route like this since I watched Peyton Manning get demolished by the Legion of Boom in one of the most boring Super Bowls of all time, 43-8. As for the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm going to be honest, I don't feel very bad for you considering all the success that you guys have had over the past couple of years, but we got to be honest, this season felt a little off. Am I right? I mean, if you just go back and take a look at some of your signature wins, going all the way back to week 1 when Isaiah Likely barely stepped out of bounds, or the controversial pass interference versus the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs victories have been very sketchy this year, and I'm not trying to insinuate that referees helped the Kansas City Chiefs, but it seemed like this is a team that got into the Super Bowl by the skin of their teeth. It wasn't based off of their pure dominance like years past. And when you consider the fact that Chris Jones was knocked out in the middle of the game, I mean, that's your second best player that's knocked out in the most pivotal game of the season. When you combine that with the fact that you won the previous 2 Super Bowls and the exhaustion that comes with that, a part of me isn't surprised that they lost the Super Bowl. Now, if there was a team that I thought was capable of three-peating, it would be the Kansas City Chiefs, but we all know that wouldn't end up happening. I want to congratulate the Philadelphia Eagles on their Super Bowl victory, and let me know in the comment section down below how you felt about this Super Bowl. Personally, I was a little underwhelmed compared to last year's and the year before's. At least like watching close games happen, but this was a complete rout. We're gonna have plenty of off-season content to cover you guys on the movement in the NFL, including the fact that the New York Jets are releasing Aaron Rodgers. We have a video on that, and I'll leave a link to it in the end screen, and I'll meet you guys there. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.